It started slowly, like a leak behind a wall, quiet, unnoticeable, until one day the damage was too obvious to ignore. At first, I dismissed the signs. A night here, another there. She had a headache, her back was tight, and she had an early client call. Life gets busy. I told myself that. Everyone goes through dry spells. Maybe we just needed a weekend away, or some time without distractions. That's what I thought. That's what I wanted to believe. But the pattern sharpened with time. By the fourth month, I could set my watch by it. 10:45, she was on the phone. 10:55, she'd toss the blanket over her lap and say the same thing. My back's stiff tonight. I think I'll lie down early. And just like that, the night closed. I'd be left in the living room, staring at the television while the audio faded into the background. Her voice upstairs, doors closing, the house settling into silence that didn't feel like rest. I began tracking it because I needed to know whether I was imagining things. A line on the calendar for every night her excuses repeated. 17, marked consecutively, before I finally stopped counting. That was enough. One morning over breakfast, she was scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. I put my coffee down a little more complicated than I meant to and asked, "Is something wrong with us?" She didn't even flinch. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, we don't talk." "We don't." I stopped myself. She was already dismissing the idea with a shake of her head. "You're overthinking again. I'm just tired. That's all." She said it like I had asked why she didn't want to go to the movies. Nothing in her tone suggested we were discussing intimacy or the absence of it. She moved on to her emails, already late for work. 2 weeks passed. By then, I could predict the entire script. She'd stretch her arms with theatrical fatigue, mumble something about having to be up early, and shuffle off to bed before I could say a word. Every evening played out like a rerun I didn't ask to watch. I tried initiating something different. Suggested a couple's massage. Offered to schedule a checkup in case it was something medical. Even floated the idea of seeing a therapist, someone neutral. She blinked slowly, like I'd proposed a business merger. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." That's when I knew this wasn't about being tired. She wasn't trying to hurt me, I don't think. But she also wasn't trying to reach me. That subtle difference hit harder than any direct rejection ever could. The problem wasn't what she said. It was how she didn't see anything wrong with it. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror while she slept in the next room. I stared at my face longer than I should have, because I wanted to remember what I looked like before I disappeared into someone else's indifference. There was no screaming. She hadn't yelled, cheated, or called me names. But the void she left between us, wide enough to feel like absence and close enough to mimic companionship, was starting to swallow me. I stayed up late that night, scrolled old photos, read emails we used to send each other when we were dating, small notes, silly jokes, "Can't wait to see you tonight," kinds of things. That version of her still lived in those lines. But the version I now shared a bed with? She didn't even notice when I didn't join her until after midnight. The next day, she laughed at something on her phone while I handed her a smoothie I'd made from scratch. She thanked me without looking up. I watched her walk out the door, heels clicking down the hallway. The sound that makes me smile. Now it only reminded me that she wasn't looking back. That evening, when she said her now usual line, "Back hurts. I'm going to bed," I nodded. No follow-up. No attempt to change her mind. I opened my laptop and ordered a gym bag. Set up a yearly membership. Set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. I even picked out a new pair of running shoes. She didn't notice. I knew that I couldn't keep showing up to a door that never opened. If she wanted space, I'd give it to her. Fully. Without expectation. But also without continuing to knock. The silence that once felt like waiting started to feel like resolution. By the end of that week, she had added 2 more nights to the invisible tally. I stopped tracking. There was no need. I had begun marking time differently, by what I could still reclaim. And that started, I decided, with mornings. The first morning, the alarm startled me before dawn. A sharp buzz sliced through the silence at 5:30 a.m., pulling me from a shallow sleep. She stirred briefly beside me, mumbling something unintelligible, then shifted deeper into the covers. I crept, dressing in the hallway so the zipping of my jacket wouldn't echo against the stillness. There was something oddly energizing about starting before the city woke up. The streets looked different under the low pink light. Emptier, cleaner, less intrusive. By the time I stepped into the gym, I'd already sipped half my coffee and cleared my head of whatever had lingered from the night before. It became routine within days. The new sneakers I'd ordered arrived earlier than expected. I lined them up next to the door like sentries guarding a version of myself I hadn't met yet. Mornings became mine. Music in my ears, sweat dripping onto rubber mats, breath steady, deliberate. Each rep felt like a small reclaiming of something she didn't see anymore. When I came home the first few mornings, she remained asleep. I'd leave her favorite thermos beside the kettle with a note that read, "See you tonight." No smiley face. Just words, a timestamp. Really, for presents she had long since stopped acknowledging. She never mentioned the notes. Perhaps she didn't read them. Or maybe she did, and she chose silence over curiosity. By the end of the first week, I began leaving earlier. Not to avoid her, but because the gym had become more than exercise. It was structured. Focus. I added 10 minutes for coffee afterward, found a quiet shop downtown where the barista remembered my name by Thursday. Her smile, casual and simple, felt like more connection than I'd had across our dining table in months. The mornings built their rhythm. I'd be out the door while she was still facing the wall, curled into herself like a question never meant to be answered. She used to roll over when I moved, instinctively touching my hand. That reflex had vanished. Now, she seemed surprised to find the bed empty. She asked once, around the end of the second week. I was wiping down a glass at the sink when she walked into the kitchen in her robe, hair still tousled from sleep. "Did you sleep out here or something?" I glanced over my shoulder. "I've been up since 5. Her brow knit. "Why?" "Morning workouts," I said. Figured it was time. She didn't reply, just grabbed her coffee and padded into the living room, phone in hand. The next morning, she rose just as I was lacing my shoes. She stood in the doorway watching me, arms folded. "You've really become a morning person, huh?" I tightened the second lace. "Trying to be. That's new," she said, almost like she meant to say something else but thought better of it. I offered a quick nod and headed out. My keys barely jingled behind me. There was no argument or confrontation. Just an observation left hanging in the air like a curtain she didn't pull back. Over time, she started to notice in ways she hadn't before. Her tone shifted slightly in the evenings, as though she wanted to check the temperature before stepping into the room. She looked at me longer across the table, sometimes catching herself before asking anything. One night, she leaned over and brushed a crumb from my collar. I turned toward her instinctively, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw something familiar. Not regret, just awareness. As if she remembered I existed in a space other than her periphery, but I didn't reach for it. That wasn't the point. The point was that I was building something for myself now. Structure, silence, discipline. Each morning became an affirmation of everything I could control, and everything I no longer needed to chase. She made a comment one morning toward the end of the third week. I was walking back in just as she was heading to the shower. A towel hung over her shoulder, and the steam fogged the mirror behind her. "You really do vanish in the mornings these days," she said, tossing the words behind her like a casual complaint. I smiled without looking up. "Early start. Trainer's brutal." She blinked. "Trainer? Twice a week now. Keeps me focused." I poured my coffee slowly. She lingered longer than usual, like she expected something else. But I finished my pour and walked past her, the thermos warm in my palm. If she noticed I hadn't kissed her goodbye in weeks, she kept it to herself. The shift wasn't just logistical, it was emotional. She had become absent at night. I became the ghost at dawn. There was no compromise, just a mutual fading, noticed only when silence stretched long enough to echo. Still, I left the thermos each day. Same spot, same note. "See you tonight." Not out of affection, but as a marker, a way of saying, I was here. I showed up, whether you noticed or not. I gave you the same courtesy you denied me. And as each sunrise passed, I began to feel lighter, sharper, like I was no longer waiting to be chosen. The third Sunday of the month, she made dinner. A rare gesture lately: rosemary chicken, roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine already breathing on the counter. The effort surprised me, but I played along. Asked her about her week, complimented the meal. She smiled more than usual, touched my arm while pouring my glass. For the first time in weeks, there was rhythm in our exchange, a thread of connection we hadn't pulled at in a while. After dinner, she changed into something new, a soft, unfamiliar robe in texture and color. She leaned against the doorframe of the bedroom while I folded my gym clothes for the next morning. "You're not going to bed early, are you?" she asked. I looked up slowly. "Probably should. I've got a training session at 6. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. I thought maybe we could hang out, watch something, or talk, she offered, casual yet weighted. I rested my folded shirt on the nightstand and met her gaze. "Long day tomorrow. Wouldn't want to be dragging." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she nodded, brushing a hand down her arm as if dusting something invisible. That night, the bed felt different. Her body faced mine, eyes blinking in the dark. For once, she wasn't retreating beneath layers of excuses. But I didn't move toward her, and she didn't reach out. In the morning, I left earlier than usual. The sun hadn't even hinted at the horizon. She was asleep, turned to my side of the bed this time. The thermos remained on the counter. I didn't leave a note. 2 days later, while I was tightening the straps on my gym bag, she asked, "Can I ask you something?" I straightened. "Sure." Her eyes lingered on my face longer than expected. "What's going on with you?" I paused, tying the last loop with care. "I'm adjusting." "To what?" "To the energy in this house." She looked confused. "What energy?" I lifted the bag. "The kind you don't offer anymore." She blinked, clearly thrown. "Are you trying to punish me or something?" I studied her face. "I'm learning to listen." "Listen to what?" "To silence. To the absence of interest. To the answers behind the excuses." She swallowed hard, leaning against the kitchen counter. "You're saying this is because we haven't." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm saying I stopped chasing moments you consistently pushed away. I'm just reflecting what I've received." Her posture stiffened. "You could have just said something." "I did," I replied. "More than once." "You waved it off each time." We stood in the space between us, surrounded by all the words we hadn't said and the meaning layered beneath the ones we had. That evening, she wore a red silk set I remembered from a birthday years ago. Her perfume lingered heavier in the hallway. She sat beside me on the couch, leaned her head on my shoulder, and placed her hand on my thigh. I let her, and when things escalated, I didn't pull away. But when it was over, she looked satisfied, almost triumphant, like she had won back something she assumed was permanently hers. I leaned against the headboard, watching the ceiling fan spin. "I'm glad we did that," she said, brushing hair from her face. I glanced at her. "It can't be a performance for approval." She frowned. "What? You're giving me weekends." I needed consistency. I needed connection during the week, too. "You mean it didn't mean anything?" she asked, propped up on one elbow now, voice tight. "I'm saying one gesture doesn't erase months of distance." She stared at me like I had rewired myself overnight. The next morning, she was already in the kitchen when I returned. Hair brushed, coffee steaming. I was thinking maybe we could have dinner again. Just us. I stirred some protein into my shake. "I'm open to that." Her shoulders eased. "But before we pretend everything's fixed," I added, "I want to show you something." She hesitated. "What?" I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. Scrolled until I found the chart I'd started weeks back. 17 straight rejections. Then a week of silence. Then that one night you asked me to turn off the TV, followed by another week of vague headaches. She leaned in slowly, reading the dates. "You kept track." I needed clarity. "This isn't a tally to hold over you. It's a record of what I experienced." She sat down across from me. "That's cold. It's factual." She crossed her arms. "What's the point of this? To guilt me into something?" "To lay out the truth," I said, "and to offer a suggestion." "What kind of suggestion?" "A reset. A mutual 30-day challenge. Intimacy, emotional and physical, on both sides. A shared effort." Her lips pressed into a line. "That sounds like a contract." "It's an opportunity." She shook her head slowly. "I don't want to schedule passion. That's not how love works." I finished my shake. "Neither does constant dismissal. That's not how respect works." She went quiet. I picked up my keys. "Think about it. We've been improvising for months, and it led us here." As I stepped outside, a light drizzle kissed the pavement. For once, I didn't feel like something was slipping through my fingers. I felt anchored, maybe for the first time in years. She spent the next few days treating the air between us like glass, fragile, reflective, easily shattered. The challenge I had offered lay unspoken between us, like a sealed envelope sitting on a shared table neither of us wanted to open first. I didn't bring it up again. I had said what I needed to say. The rest was up to her. That Thursday evening, she returned from work with a bottle of red wine and 2 steaks, the kind she knew I liked. I watched her move around the kitchen, sleeves rolled, apron tied, a small performance of domestic effort. During dinner, she asked about my day, listened more attentively than usual, even laughed when I shared a story from the gym about a guy who dropped a kettlebell on his foot while trying to flirt. When we finished eating, she leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. About what you said, the 30-day thing. I stayed still, met her eyes. I've been thinking about it. I'm just not sure if I'm comfortable treating intimacy like a schedule. I nodded slowly. It's not a spreadsheet. It's structure, a framework for reconnecting. We lost rhythm. This might help us find one again. She traced the rim of her glass. But what if it feels forced? Then we adjust. Together. She looked down for a long time before responding. I don't want to feel pressured. I set my fork down. And I don't want to feel invisible. Her fingers stopped moving. She glanced up, and for a flicker of a second, she didn't seem defensive, just exposed. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek before I left. A soft, uncertain gesture. I acknowledged it with a half smile, but my pace didn't slow. Later that week, I saw a change in her. Small, careful shifts. She initiated conversations at night, lingered beside me on the couch, reached for my hand when we walked to the store. One night, she showed up at the bathroom door while I was shaving, leaning against the frame just as she used to. I was wrong to brush you off, she said. About everything. I let distance build and kept pretending it was nothing. I rinsed my razor and dried it with a towel. I didn't handle it perfectly either. Her voice lowered. But you showed up, even when I didn't deserve it. I set the towel aside. You don't have to earn connection. You have to choose it. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. We stood there for a while, in the hum of overhead lights and running water. It wasn't passion, it was restoration. The kind of closeness that doesn't demand, but allows. That night, for the first time in what felt like years, we lay facing each other with nothing forced between us. Her hands were cautious, but present. My heart stayed guarded, but open. When we moved toward each other, it wasn't out of habit. It was a decision. Afterward, we talked, really talked. Not about calendars or obligations, but memories, plans, fears neither of us had voiced in months. She asked how long I had been feeling disconnected. I answered honestly. She didn't flinch this time. But the next morning, the energy shifted. As I poured my protein shake, she approached with her phone in hand. My sister wants to visit next weekend. You okay with that? I shrugged. Depends. Are we still working on us? She blinked. You think that'll interrupt it? I think it already has. She exhaled hard, her voice now edged. I said I was trying. What else do you want? I want consistency. Her brows arched. So if I mess up once you're done? This isn't about punishment. It's about alignment. She stepped back. You make everything a contract. And you treat commitment like a faucet. On when it's easy, off when it's inconvenient. Her jaw tightened. I'm allowed to have my own pace. So am I. The silence stretched. Eventually, she walked out, sandals clacking against the tile. The front door closed with a soft click. That night, I rented a studio apartment 5 blocks from my office. Just a single room with exposed brick and a mattress that still smelled like new packaging. I wasn't moving out permanently yet, but I needed a space that didn't carry the weight of expectations or the memory of nights where I stared at the ceiling waiting for warmth that never came. I moved a few essentials in: clothes, laptop, a set of spare keys. I left the original set in the bowl near our front door. Didn't say anything. Just let them sit there, obvious but unspoken. She noticed the absence first. The lack of gym shoes by the door. The missing razor. The change in scent was noticeable when I walked in after work, having already showered and changed. You're staying somewhere else? She asked quietly one evening, eyes searching my face. I nodded once. During the week. Keeps things focused. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then tried. So that's your solution? No, I said calmly. That's my boundary. She looked like she wanted to argue, but the words never arrived. The following morning, I left before sunrise. On the table, a note waited beside her coffee. Effort isn't a weekend event. Neither is love. The apartment became more than a convenience. Within weeks, it started to feel like clarity. The kind that doesn't come with dramatic revelations, but rather from quiet, uninterrupted mornings and evenings stripped of emotional static. The mattress, though thinner and less forgiving than the one at home, bore no weight of unspoken grievances. My things stayed organized. The silence wasn't hollow, it was clean. She called that first Monday after I'd begun sleeping there full-time. Her name lit up my screen while I stood in line at a coffee shop. I stared at the display until it dimmed, then tucked the phone back in my pocket. She sent a message afterward. Short. We need to talk. I responded with a time and location, neutral ground, an open park bench between her workplace and my building. She arrived early. That used to be my habit. Now, I allowed her the space to wait. When I approached, she stood, eyes cautious but precise. Is this where you tell me it's over? I sat slowly. This is where I ask if we're building something real or just managing appearances. She blinked. So this is a test? It's a conversation. She looked out across the park, hands folded tightly in her lap. You changed so fast. 1 month, you were asking for closeness. The next, you were gone. I stayed long after you stopped seeing me. That's not fair, she said, eyes snapping back. I was going through a lot. We both were, I answered. The difference is, I spoke up. She didn't argue, just sighed and leaned back. So what happens now? I've drafted a separation agreement, I said quietly. Simple terms. No drama. Her breath caught, but she nodded once. You've already signed it? Yes. Why not tell me before now? I wanted to see if effort would become habit or just a performance. She winced. So all of this was a setup? No. It was a mirror. I gave what I had left and waited to see if you'd offer anything without prompting. I did try, she murmured. You did, I acknowledged. But only when loss felt real. We sat there in the mild breeze, leaves shifting above us. Nothing screamed. Nothing exploded. But everything had changed. Later that evening, I packed the last of my things. She was at her sister's for the weekend. Her perfume lingered faintly in the curtains. I didn't rush. Each drawer held memories, but none begged to be kept. On the kitchen counter, I left my set of keys next to the original bowl, the one that had been empty since I moved out. Tucked underneath, a folded envelope. Inside, just a few lines. Love is nourished by reciprocity. Where warmth is missing at night, it grows cold by dawn. I didn't vanish. I reflected, and in your silence, I found my voice. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking in the space that had once held laughter, midnight conversations, shared Sunday rituals. Those echoes remained, but they had become soft and faded, like the scent of rain hours after the storm. In the weeks that followed, there were no long emails or frantic calls. She reached out once, asked if I was certain. I replied with gratitude for the past and peace for the future. The studio became a small haven. The mattress still lacked comfort, but I slept deeper. Mornings stayed early, deliberate. Evenings grew quieter but lighter. One day, while folding laundry, I found the thermos I used to leave for her. It still had the fading sticker she'd once placed on it. Strong coffee, stronger you. I held it for a while, then set it aside. That version of me was still alive, just different now. Less desperate, more whole. Love hadn't disappeared. It had changed form and transformed from sacrifice into standard, from pleading into peace. There's something sacred in walking away before bitterness settles in. I hadn't done it to hurt her. I'd done it because the version of me that stayed silent while being dismissed didn't exist anymore. And in that quiet room, sunlight warming the floorboards, I finally understood. You can't thrive in a place where effort is borrowed and connection is conditional. So I chose morning light over nightly shadows. And it was enough.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.